for me, it seemed like it was going to be, like more normal because like my family, all of them just did this courtship thing. But then when it comes down to where it's like, it's actually you in the courtship, I think even Jeremy being an outsider coming in, looking at it, and we would talk through like, okay, are we going to have my 10-year-old brother there as my chaperone to be with us at dinner or in the car? It was interesting. Once we were engaged, especially, like, I think that's where I started to realize, oh, wow, we actually need time to talk about things that we need to talk about, just us. And so if he came out to visit, we were long distance. He was in Texas. I was in Arkansas. So if he flew out to visit for a weekend, he would say, okay, I'm going to call you when I get home. Or like if he was, even if we were like in person, we needed to talk.
Because your 10-year-old brother is there. You're
yes.
like, he doesn't need to hear
you
this.
Can't talk. You can't talk about that when you're about to get married. So
I never did the only chaperones we would use is like, we'd go on a double date or something because I just wasn't going to do.
He was like, nah.
I wasn't going to have a 10-year-old kid with me.
Yeah.
Like, it was kind of absurd.
So just going to dinner.
I was just like, you know what, Ben and Jess, you want to go on a double date
Did
or
this
something?
happen after you played professional soccer?
Oh yeah, and
so you'd been like, yeah, I'm sure. I don't know if you've like traveled the world doing that. Yeah, but you must have just been like a guy, just being a guy, and then you're like, okay, now I need a 10-year-old on my date with my
that wasn't gonna
girlfriend.
happen.
And he was pastoring a church at the time.
Okay,
I'm like doing marriage counseling.
Like, how old were you?
I was 27.
He was 27. So.
You're old. You were older than me when this was going on.
So that was the thing. Is
Yeah.
like I would literally go from like pastoring a church, I'm doing marriage counseling, and then step into a setting where it was like those rules, and that's where I say it was like playing the rules, not the game. It was like so focused on the rules, missing the point of what we're doing, the objective here, which is like. And I told her honestly, and this is why I wouldn't be pro courtship or anything. If I need. Because the spirit behind it is good, right? Like, oh, you want to have purity and you want to really focus on each other and not get physically entangled. And okay. But if I really need these rules to keep me moral, I'm not a good dude. Like, don't marry me. Like, if the only thing keeping me pure and focused on her and loving her well is like a chaperone, I'm not a good person. Like, I need to work on self-control. So we saw through those boundaries. And here's the deal. You can get around boundaries if you want to get around boundaries. Legalism and rules never accomplish. It looks like it's going to work, but it never does what it actually doesn't deal with the issue. And so Ginger and I honestly looked at our courtship and said, we'll make the most of it. I wanted to obviously respect that. And so
yeah, Jared was so respectful, like coming into that setting. He didn't have like an attitude about him, which I think I really appreciated that. And I think he didn't even know all of what he was getting himself into. I always tell him, I'm like, you didn't know what you're getting yourself into when you stepped into our world. But he was so good about like, okay, I'm going to jump through these hoops because this is like what's required of me. And then, we'll have our lives together.
I want to ask how that even happened in the first place. Like, did you, because you guys met at a conference, did you say, come back home and be like, Mom, Dad, there's this guy. Did you ask to court him?
No.
Like, how does that even work?
Yeah.
Getting started in that.
It was crazy. So whenever he showed up there, I met him at that conference. And it wasn't until later, like, how many months later was that? Several. It was several. It was December.
Five or six, yeah.
So 5 or 6 months went by, and he was talking to Ben and Jessa. And you'd visited like one other time, came to our house in between then, just to hang out with my brother-in-law because they were friends. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I have some sister-in-laws, My brother-in-law.
He's like, I got a few.
And so yeah, you have some to choose from. Here you go. Just take your pick. So he took his pick and it worked out. But it was like, what happened was, though, he signed up for a missions trip that we were all going on.
Yeah, I started to like her, and I'm like strategizing with Jessa.
How
and Jessa's
can I get
like,
to know her?
She's like, go on this missions trip because you have all these guys coming trying to get to know these girls. Obviously, there's a wall up because of the TV and all that. She's like, go on this missions trip. You'll get to know my family really well.
And it was being recorded for the show.
No, that one wasn't.
Oh, okay.
No, that one wasn't.
I don't think so. They had already filmed a lot of them. I don't think they wanted to go on that.
So I signed up for that. And so that was Jessa's kind of a helpful strategy. And she's like, you'll get to see Ginger as well. Like for this, I think it was a week long.
Yeah. We were gone for like 2 weeks. I think you only came for like the first part. And
so
it was great.
I went like, okay, I want to get to know her obviously better, but I also want to get to know her family and stuff. And so it was organic. It was as organic as it could be.
It was really pretty chill. We were on like a big missions group with like, I don't know, 60 other people or so. We were able to just like be around each other on that trip, away from like even filming and stuff, which is great, less pressure that way. And it was awesome because whenever we came back from that trip, well, he had talked to my dad at the end of that trip. You can tell him about that.
Yeah, and I just expressed interest, and so he wanted to get to know me, obviously, which is
was that
understandable.
like a high pressure conversation to enter into?
No, I don't think so. He probably saw it coming a mile away.
Okay.
You know, like
It's like you're talking to his daughter all this time, and
yeah,
he
I think I'm being slick, like on this mission trip.
Yeah, and he signed up like a week before the trip.
Yeah,
and we had signed up like several months before. They allowed him to like come last minute.
I think Jessa pulled some.
So Jessa was like, "We got to get this guy on this trip."
But so he saw it coming, I think. But so I just asked him like, "Hey, I want to get to know her," and he was like, "Yeah, she's great." And I was like, "I know," and he's like, "Well, you need to get to know me first." So
I mean, yeah, what was that conversation though?
It was like a 3-minute conversation. I remember it.
Oh,
it was
pretty short.
Yeah,
I would have thought it was like a long, because you literally watched 60 hours of Bill Gothard's teachings.
Well, no, this was later. That was later.
That was later. Yeah.
So that was like Abby said. We got our timeline. We zoomed forward. So I asked Mr. Duggar, and then he's like, "Let's get to know each other first," and then that's where him and I start talking. And he actually asked me soon after to start watching the Gothard stuff.
Was it a VHS tape? Like, how did you get this?
No, they had
a
website. It's streamed online.
Yeah. Stream online.
And
was there questions afterward to make sure you actually watched it?
Oh yeah, we would talk about it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we would talk on Friday mornings and chat about it. And at first, it was interesting because, you know, going back to the whole Gothard thing, I was just like, oh, this guy's got some interesting things to say. And it was kind of philosophical. And I remember in one of our first conversations, Ginger and I talking about those, she asked me what I thought. And I went, yeah, he's not a Bible teacher, but he's got some interesting things to say. I think that's like my exact sentence. And I think for her, she was like, what?
It was really shocking.
Because she thought he was the Bible teacher.
He was the most amazing person,
yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, he would... So that's what made Gothard effective, was he had a cultural analysis which was accurate. It was the solution that got wonky. So he would, like, he talked about the rise of humanism and secularism, and you're just going, yeah, that's right, you know? And so those initial sessions I watched, I would at times go, ooh, that's a little interesting, but there weren't like alarm bells going off, you know?
Yeah, it wasn't until the further in you get to the teachings.
And with Jim Bob, did he ask you questions about, have you dated somebody before? Have you kissed someone before?
Oh my goodness, bro. I had a 50-page questionnaire I filled out.
Wait, you're kidding. It was actually a sheet.
Yeah.
So it was like, how far have you been with a woman?
Yeah, everything.
Every single question. Have you smoked weed? Have you drank? All those questions in there. What was the most bizarre one that was like, what is, like, anything that threw you off that wasn't expected on the sheet?
Probably all of it. I don't know. I think it started out like,
do you have any debt? What is, you know?
So it was financial. It was moral. It was relationships. It was past history. It was
family's history.
Oh, everything. It was view on finances, view on debt, view on family, view on kids, view on. I mean, it was like.
Was it provided by the IBLP, or did he create it?
Somebody.
I think somebody in the IBLP.
Yeah, I think somebody did, and they sent it to him.
And low key, it was actually. It's like I wasn't mad at it because it's a great conversation.
It seems really crazy if it's. I mean, it was crazy, but I'm just saying, like. It actually did end up on the flip side of it. It ended up producing a lot of conversation for us.
It's great. Like,
because
I
was able to kind of look at that and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna look through this and see.
Honestly, now that I'm thinking, I'm like, I was about to be like, that's crazy. But when I'm thinking about this, I'm like, that's kind of good. Like, if you're marrying somebody that has $200,000 of student loans, you might want to avoid that relationship.
Bro, and just wait. If you guys have a daughter,
that's a horrible thing to say.
Right? I mean, seriously, come on.
If you're a teacher and you marry someone,
you're handing these out. You're making photocopies.
Done. Abby, it's already done.
We could have gone to school at like Michigan, right, where it was $60,000 a year, and put all that into, like, that would have all been debt. And then here we have an arts degree. Like, how do you make money with an arts degree when you have what is that, $240,000 in debt?
He's crunching numbers right now,
right? That's $250,000 in debt.
So here's the crazy thing. So
I like that.
So, like I said, like the motivation for a lot of that was good, because a lot of couples, this is what happens. Couples get involved physically. They get involved on like superficial personality traits. Like, oh my goodness, we get along so good because we both love the same movies. And they actually go real serious real fast with an intense relationship, and oftentimes never actually hit the reality of life and engage on the reality of things that are years down the road, but because it's such a superficially based relationship, they're not thinking permanence. They're not thinking long term. And so, you know, when you think about what a marriage is, when you're saying I do, and you're saying those cute words, you know, in sickness and in health, well, in poverty and wealth, no, that's real. And life is hard, and life is difficult, and love is not a feeling first. It's a decision that results in feelings, but it's a self-sacrificial decision to commit to someone regardless of anything else. No matter what happens, I love you the way Christ has loved me, which means I love you in spite of your failures, mistakes, in spite of whatever life throws at us. I am choosing to love you. That's heavy. And so people who go into marriages, and I do pre-marriage counseling all the time, people go into marriage not thinking about the basic foundational elements of life. And that includes finances, that includes moral decisions, that includes children or whatever else. So to front load relationships with questions like that, I'm not saying like on second date, be like, okay, let's talk about,
but
maybe not 50 pages.
50
either.
pages.
so it start like, that's a good motivation.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I have 2 daughters, like I'm putting those guys through the ringer. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to just,
not like in a,
but
not
it
in a-
becomes like this formalized kind of like, and that's where purity culture I think went wrong.
yes.
But
It's almost,
it created,
it's too formal at the beginning.
yeah.
Which
Oh,
it kind of,
yeah.
that's the issue I think that I saw with it too, is like, it's super formal and there's so much pressure to like know if you want to like be in a courtship
Yeah.
with this person before it's actually like known. And probably part of that was too, I don't know. I mean, part of it was we were in the public eye. And so if you bring somebody around that you're talking to, you need to know right away, like, am I going to be in a relationship with this person? Because maybe they're going to film something about us and then maybe it'll air. And then if we break up, it's more pressure. So we also had that.
Yeah.
But with the whole courtship thing,
Yeah.
I think that the main thing was like, there's pressure to know like, okay, do I want to like marry this person tomorrow? Well, I don't know. I need to get to know you. But you also like, can't be casual friends.
That really freaked me out with Abby because I viewed relationships in the same way. So I almost broke up with Abby in the first month because I was like, am I going to marry this girl? I don't know. And it was eating me alive. It was freaking me out.
What?
And
Relax,
I was
dude.
like, because I had that same view. I was like, okay, dating is for marriage. So like, am I going to marry her? I got to decide right now.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like, she's cool. She's my friend.
Yeah.
Like we really like each other. I don't
Yeah.
know. That's really freaking scares me. And so I almost ended it because of that. But I'm so curious because Abby was my first relationship. I'm so curious. Was Ginger your first relationship?
No. And I was open with her about that at first. Like I got married when I was 28 and she got married when she was 22. There's 6 years. So I just turned 28. She was 22. And if I had gotten married when I was 22, it would have been a disaster, right? I was not in a place of maturity, of spiritual maturity. And so I'd had previous relationships. And so, yeah, and she was aware of that. But I was her first serious relationship too.
So was that hard though, not being, because you had to keep physical distance between you at all times. You couldn't just like watch a movie with your hand over her shoulder, right? Like,
Well,
We
we could
snuggle
like,
up,
we could like sit on the couch next to each other or whatever. But like, it was just rules. Like they just have a lot of rules. So,
but for me, like I was pastoring. I was really serious about my relationship with the Lord by that point in my life.
Yeah.
And so I wanted
He was
physical
mature.
purity.
Yeah,
I didn't want. Yeah.
We didn't. Like we I think that it would have been fine to like kiss before we were married, but we didn't.
Yeah.
Like we followed all the rules that my family wanted us to follow.